Hello, wonderful. It is Sarah K Ramsey, and I am here with Natalie Hoffman of Flying Free. Hey, Natalie, how are you?
Hi, good. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. So you specialize in faith, like Christian-based women, right? Or is it more conservative? Tell people a little bit about your niche.
Yeah, it's Christian. I mean, most of the women are Christian, but it's women of faith. So there are people who are, from other faiths as well, but mostly Christian women, mostly Bible Belt, Baptist. It seems like those women gravitate towards my ministry. So, because that's my background, very conservative. Bill Gothard, Vision
Yes.
Forum. You just throw out a few
Yes.
names to
Get people know they're in the right
John
place.
Piper.
Right? Yeah.
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 That's a church I went to, John Piper's church, for many years. Yeah.
Interesting. Oh, did not know that about you. So when that type of woman, right, faithful, dedicated to her faith, committed to being a good wife, committed to keeping her family together, committed to being a good Christian, committed to serving God, just thinks, wow, I've really been in a horrific situation. She faces different challenges than someone from the secular world, right?
Well, yes, because her faith is informing how she views her situation. And so she's going to come at the problem from a different perspective than someone who doesn't have a faith or doesn't believe in God, or maybe believes in God, but it's just not personal.
Well, and there's this idea of disappointing God. Like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be disappointing God if I take care of myself, right?
Well, and she's been a lot of times these women have been raised, or in their adult lives, they've been steeped in the thinking that you don't even go there in your mind. That once you're married, you've made your bed, now you have to lie in it. I mean, even secular people believe that too, but I think the faith component adds so much more pressure to stay in a relationship that's not healthy. So
when you feel like you're letting down the church in some ways, right? If you've been, served in ministry, been in front of people, and it's like, oh my gosh, I've been hiding what was happening in my house for a long time.
Yeah.
And now I'm going to ruin the church, right?
Yeah, Oh, I hear that a lot actually from pastors' wives who will believe that they're stepping forward and saying something. It's not just their husband's reputation that they're worried about. They're worried about all the people that they love in their church body. And it's not just the church. It's that if you step forward, that you are going to affect your family of origin. You're going to affect your friends. You're going to affect your immediate family, your children, everything. So you kind of feel like the weight of the world and all of their happiness, it depends on, what you do in this situation. And it really makes you feel trapped.
So absolutely. So what advice do you have for a woman with the weight of the world on her shoulders who's thinking it is my job to keep everything together?
Yeah. Well, that's pretty typical thinking. I mean, a lot of us Christian women, we tend to be people pleasers. I think
I'm going to stop right there.
Yeah.
Are you saying, and I'm being facetious, are you saying that it's possible to be a Christian and not a people pleaser? Is that a possibility?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I know that's
totally, Jesus himself was a Christian who was not a people pleaser.
Such a great point. And I know it seems silly to say that, but I'm trying to think of, like back at different times in my life, 10 years ago, if you just said that, I'd been like, well, yeah, I guess that's true. I guess you can, because it seems so entrenched in what we teach women about being a good Christian.
Yeah. Well, and think about it. We want to please people because we want them to be happy with us, and that makes us feel good. So even, if you look at it from another perspective, we're actually doing it to protect ourselves. If people are happy with us and they're feeling good around us, then of course we're happy with us and we feel good around us. So the challenge is to get to the place where you can be happy with yourself and feel good about yourself, regardless of what all of the external circumstances are, regardless of what all of the external people are saying about you. Because if our happiness depends on everybody else and their opinions or their thoughts or their emotions, then we have no power. Then we are at the whims of everybody else's ideas and beliefs and emotions.
Mm-hmm.
And we have no personal power at that point.
And at the whims of everyone else's definition of Christianity.
Exactly. And there's millions of definitions of Christianity. I mean, there's millions of different, I shouldn't say millions, I'm exaggerating, but there's so many different denominations, and so many different nuances of beliefs, even within those denominations. And of course, each one is firmly entrenched in the idea that they are correct and they are the right one. And so it's just, I mean, getting out of my situation was so eye-opening to realize, wow, I was just in a very small bubble of a certain set of beliefs. And there are so many other bubbles of certain sets of beliefs. And I actually need to put my big girl pants on and decide what I believe. And I don't want to live in a bubble anymore. I want to live before God and make my own decisions about what I believe before God.
So one of my first segues into that, have you ever read Rachel Held Evans' Year of Biblical Womanhood?
I think I've read all of her books except
that one. Okay, so that was you read her more advanced stuff. That was her more like,
yeah, I know. I know that book. I know that book.
Yes. When it was like it's so funny because she takes what the Bible says literally for a year about what it means to be a woman.
Yeah.
And it really kind of opened my eyes and my beliefs to think, are there people who love Jesus and love God who may believe anything differently than me? And it's like, well, of course they do. And then it's like, well, is it possible to get a divorce as a Christian? Maybe that could be in some people's belief systems.
Yeah.
And then what would have to be happen? Like, what data would I need? What reasoning would I need? Who would I need to be for that belief to be true in my life?
Right.
Yep.
I mean, that was definitely a question in my mind when I was thinking about when I finally accepted the fact that, yeah, I'm in an emotionally abusive relationship. Now what do I have to do about it? And do I have to do anything? And the idea of divorce had never crossed my mind until, actually, it's interesting because some of the people from my church would say to me, well, don't be thinking about divorce. Like, we won't help you if you're thinking about divorce. And that was actually what introduced the idea to my mind. I like to say that just in case they're listening. Anyway,
hello everyone. Look at us chatting. Remember all the times
all
we do
your fault.
nice. Yeah. Sorry, not sorry. Yeah, no, kidding.
Exactly.
Not kidding.
Anyway, I had to go there and try to figure out, is it okay for Christians to get divorced? And if it is, what are the parameters around that? And, what are the rules? And because I'm a rule keeper, and I have been a rule keeper since the day I was born. And so I did not want to break any of the correct rules and make anyone mad at me. But that started my journey, though, on researching divorce and what the Bible says about divorce in the Old Testament and the New Testament. And that really, I mean, it opened up my eyes to see so many things, not just about divorce, but all kinds of things in the Bible that I had just taken at face value that people had taught me, there are so many other ways to look at that. I don't even know, because I'm not one of those people. I'm not like one of those people who likes to dig into the Greek or the Hebrew. I wish I was. I really, really wish I was, but I don't. I just kind of freeze up and my eyeballs, start popping out of my head.
My dad is doctorate is a pastor, so I'm like, oh, what do I know right now to add to this conversation? But it's like in Micah, right? Doesn't God divorce Israel?
Well, yeah, God divorces Israel. And because Israel doesn't keep covenant with God, but God always keeps covenant. But in that particular situation, it was a deal. It was like, if you do this, then I'll do this. Well, they didn't do that. And even though they didn't keep their side of the promise, God still gave them chance after chance after chance after chance. And then he finally divorced them. But in that divorce, it opened it up then so that everyone could be, the bride of Christ. And then Jesus Christ, of course, came on the scene. I mean, this is all part of God's big plan, right? But I don't know that we can build a whole theology on just the fact that God, because some people would say, well, God didn't really divorce Israel. And that's not really, you could take anything, any argument, and you could build a case for one side or for the other side. So at the end of the day, for me, it boiled down to which theology actually is a theology that shows love and compassion for human beings, for souls. And the theology that showed compassion for the women and the children who are suffering in abusive relationships and abusive churches was a theology that said you don't have to. No, actually, you don't have to be abused because you don't have a certain appendage between your legs. That does not qualify you to spend the rest of your life in an abusive relationship. And here's the thing: if our churches, if Christianity was a religion that actually upheld the dignity of all human beings, men, women, and children, that's how we could change the world. But we don't. We actually are just as misogynistic and just as racist and just as nasty as the world has been throughout all of history. That has to change. And the theology that says you can't divorce from an abuser just because when you were 17 years old, you went down an aisle and said, I do, to someone that you didn't really know, that is crappy theology in my book.
And in my mind, it became, when I look at, if I'm looking at, you have daughters, right?
Yes.
Okay. One of your daughters, right? So I'm looking at one of your daughters and I'm God, I'm playing the role of God in this like little scenario. And it's like, you know what? If you really want to be a good Christian, then you really have to put up with his bad behavior. In fact, you have to help him become a better sinner.
Yeah.
You have to cover up his sin.
It's ridiculous.
It's crazy. And when you think, and I think when you look at it as like a girl, right? Like you think about it as a girl and say, is this what I'm teaching her about being a good Christian?
Yeah. Right. I think the church, you brought up something even before we started the podcast. You brought up the idea that the church, they support the abuser a lot of times. And I think it's because the church and the abuser have the same agenda, and that is to save the marriage. The marriage is the big
idol. Marriage is the idol.
Right. Now they have different reasons for wanting to save the marriage.
Yes.
The abuser obviously wants to save the marriage because he owns that woman. Mm-hmm. She is his property in his mind. He's entitled to her. He's entitled to her mind, her body, and everything else. So he wants to save the marriage for that reason. And the church wants to save the marriage because they have an agenda of, the marriage is whatever, you're right. It's sometimes I wonder, like, why does it matter so much? Like, why can't we just let marriages go? If churches allowed people to get divorced for abuse, there would be more divorces up on the front end of things. It's kind of like we have to go through the river of misery to get to the other side where things get better. So there would be more divorce at the front end of things. But at the end of the day, long term, if you're thinking long term, what you'd have is a safe place where people know, where abusers know that's not a safe. Right now, abusers know the number one safe place for them is church. It's the best. If they're going to go fishing for a victim, they're going to fish in the pond of the church. Best place to get the best catches.
And that
should not be.
That should not be. Someone who will remain nameless, but is a very important person in this abusive space, right? She said, do not find a man at church. That is the absolute worst place to find.
Seriously.
And I won't quote her because I don't know if she wants to be quoted on that because it's a pretty strong statement and I really like her. So I won't. But I was so shocked. I mean, and I believe her, but it's like, oh, you need to find a good guy at church, send your kids to church and find a good guy, send them to Christian school, send them to this. And you're exactly right. You're exactly right. It is because they are locked in a way. If you are maybe a secular person and you go and say, oh my gosh, I hear at work, this has been happening and he's throwing things around the house. In fact, he held me down. I couldn't leave my house and he calls me a bitch all the time and he cuts me down in front of my children. People at the outside are going to say, oh, that's horrible.
And they're going to support you if you decide that you're going to take those painful steps to get out. They're going to support you. They're going to have your back.
And a pastor, well, have you given him enough sex?
Yeah, exactly.
Have you been forgiving enough? Are you having an affair and you're trying to cover it up by saying he has an anger issue?
Yeah.
And I have heard have heard someone say they went to a biblical pastor, and 2 different biblical pastors. One said, if you are willing to let the sun go down on your anger, first 15 minutes of the counseling session. This has been happening for 10 years. Horrible things. Well, let's not talk about that. Let's talk about your anger. Wow. And if you're not willing to let the sun go, if you are willing to let the sun go down on your anger here in the first 15 minutes of counseling session, then you really need to question that you are a Christian.
Wow. And you know what my response would be to that? The fact that you as a counselor or pastor or people helper can sit across the table from me and not be angry about what I just told you makes me wonder if you're a Christian.
Oh, yeah. But then you come across as contentious.
Right.
Well, and I support what you said. I think you should say that too.
Well, and I actually need to give a caveat here. I don't actually really promote going around and trying to judge whether people are Christians or not. I'm not saying that.
Right, no.
Just to show that, if you're going to throw that in my face, there's a whole bunch I could throw back in your face. So let's just knock it off and let's look at the facts here. All right. Yeah, let's throw out all of the Christian cliches. I'm so sick to death of Christian cliches. Mm-hmm. Let's look at reality. Let's take the blinders off and look at reality. What's actually going on in this situation? There's so much education now to be had out there. There's no excuse for people, for churches, for leaders not to be educated in this area. And they should be being educated in the seminaries as well. But
I hope that's what my dad's going to do when he retires. He has had, of course, a lot of kickback on his sermons around divorce and remarriage because he's read probably all the things you and I have, Lundy Bancroft, and, all those, he's very well educated in the subject. And it's like, whoa, here's a Southern Baptist pastor who's never been divorced, white male with his doctorate, 30 years of ministry without scandal, saying these things. That just, we need more men in that space because, Gary Thomas, I am so thankful he's going to be on the podcast. And I'm so thankful for his message because, he wrote that Sacred Marriage and then was like, whoa, I was not telling women to get abused.
Yeah.
But I think it's just that idea, those Christian memes, it's like, I just need to forgive more. I just need to be less. I need to die to self more. I need to be more self-sacrificing. And the reality, and my perspective at this point now is my role here on this earth to help my husband be a better sinner? When I stand before God, am I going to say, I covered up his anger, I covered up his rage, I covered up his abuse, I covered up his image, and I was, that's who I was as a person. He became God. I did what he said. He became the main event of my life, and I scrambled around to keep it all together. Do I get my good and faithful servant sticker, Jesus?
Yeah, right. And
right?
Yeah.
I couldn't come to terms with that, right? I could not. It's just like, surely that is not who God is. Surely that is not what our role here on this earth is.
Sorry. My son, I have an autistic child, and I had everything all set up so that everyone was quiet. And I don't know if you guys can hear him screaming in the background, but I keep putting my mute button on, hoping that you can.
No, you cannot hear anything. And this is like all COVID. I started this, and I was like, I literally forgot to turn the light on. And so my lighting is not, because I'm sitting in a dark room in front of a lovely window, and I do have lighting that I forgot to turn on. And that's always I am totally fine with that. That's always, when you see these people, it's like, oh, their lives are so perfect, and it's this, and it's I think I know I followed Natalie long enough, and I know I can speak for myself to say my life is authentic. I practice what I preach, but my life is not perfect, but I'm okay with that too.
Yeah, I love that. I'm totally with you. I'm just like, hey, real people here.
Yeah,
real people.
Yeah. Anybody who looks like they have it too all together, those people I watch out for. I'm like, it made me nervous. They made me nervous. Oh, so what else? We didn't hear a thing. So what else, when you think about that woman and that conversation and those struggles in her head, what other pieces of advice and help do you give her?
Well, let's see. What would I start with? Is this someone who knows, she's fully aware that she is being abused and she's just not sure what to do at that point?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, first of all, I tell her you don't have to do anything right away. I think a lot of times people start to panic, and panicking is not going to help. That's going to take your prefrontal cortex offline, and then you're not going to be able to think clearly.
Mm-hmm.
I really think that women need to do kind of probably what you and I did, just sit back and just keep educating themselves and getting strong inside of themselves and figure out what they want to believe about who they are. Because so up until that point, that woman has probably been defined by what everyone else believes that she is. And she probably, when she comes into a room, she sees herself through their eyes. And that's kind of like looking at in a circus mirror. You're seeing this distorted image of yourself, and then you think that's who you are. But deep down inside in your core, that's not who you are. And you need to get to know who you are and get to like that person. One of the exercises that I have women do when I have a program called Flying Free. And one of the first courses, we do this kind of silly exercise, but I still do it to this day. And it's where you look in the mirror and you talk to yourself with a smile on your face, because there's these mirror neurons in your brain that connect with that face looking back at you. Your physical brain doesn't know that it's you. It just sees the smile and it hears the tone of voice and it likes that. And you talk to yourself and you tell yourself good things about yourself, even if your brain doesn't believe them at that point. You're in
hard. I think that would be hard for me now.
Well, and you should try it. It's amazing.
It makes me nervous.
No, I know. It's very, very difficult at first to do this.
Yes.
But you start small. You might start by just smiling at yourself and saying, I like you. I like you. You're a beautiful person. Just say that. And you might laugh, giggle, you might cry, you might walk away and go, that was really stupid. But the next time you look in the mirror, you say it again and you add something. You get to the place where you can actually look at yourself totally naked in the mirror. I know this sounds really weird, but you can say, thank you to your body for everything that it has given to you and blessed you with. And whether it's children or gotten you through illness or helped you run a marathon or whatever your body did to help you, thank it, what you want to do is start building new synapses in your brain that create beliefs and thoughts about yourself that are positive and that are good and true, rather than, because right now, a woman coming out of a situation like that, often she's been programmed from the time she was a small child to believe that she's worthless, to believe that she's only good for what she can give, to believe that she needs to play small, or that if she plays big, that she's self-centered, or, like I was told when I remember my mom seeing me looking in the mirror and she said, that's so vain. That you look in the mirror like that, so vain. So I was really ashamed to look at mirrors, to look at myself. I would go into the bathroom in a public restaurant and I would keep my head down and just wash my hands. And I would not look at myself in the mirror for fear that that would be vain or that someone would think I was vain. Like that was my brain's programming. But you can actually reprogram your brain so that you can go into a bathroom, look at yourself in the mirror and smile and not care what anyone else thinks around you. Like be totally okay that they think that you might be a little bit cracked.
Well, and if anybody's like, oh, unprogramming, that seems overwhelming. I bring it back to practice, right? And my undergraduate degree was in classical piano, right? So I practiced all those years to be really good at piano. I have not practiced the cello, right? So if you heard me play the cello, you would think I was a horrible musician. Well, that's not true. I just haven't had the practice on the cello that I did on the piano. So thinking about it in terms of practicing a different thought pattern, practicing thinking different thoughts about yourself. I start everything, I don't know if you know this, everything I start with hello, wonderful is like my opening to everything.
I love that.
that I do. And my clients and people who follow me, they're like, oh, hello, wonderful. And they start telling themselves that in the mirror. And that was the goal, right? That's what I wanted. At first, it was my voice in their head. Hello, wonderful. Yeah. And then hopefully, and they have said, it becomes their voice in their head, right? Yes. That's what we're talking about, right?
That's exactly what I'm talking about. And you can, some people think, oh, I can't do that when I'm in the middle of my relationship, but that's the most important time to start doing that. because that's going to change your brain, and it's going to change your perspective on even your ability to get out.
Yes.
You could start off the year thinking that I could never get out. I could never do that, and having zero self-confidence. And by the end of the year, after practicing all of those things, you could actually start having thoughts in your mind that were more along the lines of, maybe I could get out someday. And if I did get out, what would that look like? And what would that process look like? And you start going down that road. And then a year out from that, you might start actually putting some things into practice that would actually be the catalysts to moving you out.
Well, and I want to recap what she said because that's really, really important. Okay. So first, build up you a bit. Second, develop some type of possibility plan. It doesn't have to be an action plan at that point.
Right.
Possibility plan. And then you can create action steps. So what you guys don't know, before we went online, I had a phone call with someone and I was like, Natalie, I think I need to send her to Flying Free. I think she'd be a better fit for your program, because the people in Wonder Soulman program are probably going like, what? That timeline, because it's made for, in these coaches and these conversations, you're made for different stages in the journey.
Yeah.
Right. I'm creating action plans, literally step 3, day 3, action plan. What are we doing? What are we going? But it's made for women who've already made that leap and made those decisions. It's not, you're talking about, it's so lovely. It's like a little baby in their nest and giving them safe places to grow wings.
Yes. Yes. One other thing that I would say is you can start now because our physical brain doesn't know the difference between the past, the present, and the future. You can actually start by imagining what your life would be like 5 years from now if you were out, and writing down in as many, vivid details as possible, your new life being out of that relationship. And then write it in the first person present, like as if it is you right now. And your brain will actually you'll activate something called the reticular activating system in your brain. And your brain will actually start scanning the horizon for evidence of that scenario. And it will start noticing micro things in your environment, and you will start making micro decisions. I'm not talking big decisions or even obvious decisions. I'm talking about little tiny decisions and choices that will end up moving your life. It's kind of like, if you think about a ship, if you turned the rudder just even an inch to the left or to the right, and then you take that ship and you go out, 500 miles, it is going to be in a completely different place just from turning the rudder an inch. Okay. So that's what I'm talking about. These tiny little things will start happening, and your brain will actually start working on your behalf. Right now, our brains, for a woman who's in a situation like that, her brain is so programmed to believe certain things that she is making micro decisions that are proving to her brain what her brain wants to believe is true. She's proving it to herself. And that's what we do. We get in these loops. What we want to do is we want to interrupt that loop and make a new destination. And then our brain starts to want to prove that could actually happen and come true as well.
And I want to go back to the conversation we had about God divorcing Israel. Okay. And you said it opened it up. It became a new birth for everyone. Right? And our lives have become a new birth, talking to people all over the world, being I think your relationship's loving. I think it seems like a great relationship. I know how there are relationships with partners who don't yell at you, who support you. My book's about to come out, and my husband has done the laundry. He's an executive in one of the top companies in the world. He works like a Fortune 200 company, right? And he's doing the laundry and taking care of dinner because I'm writing a book. Yeah. That's real life for people.
Yeah. Yeah, it can be.
Real life for people. It can be.
Yes.
If you little baby bird, grow wings.
That's right. That's right. And for some people who are listening, they might be thinking, oh my gosh, I could never, I can never get out, let alone get remarried. Some people are out and they're still thinking, well, I don't really want to get remarried. So but you don't have to start there. You don't have to like, you don't have to,
Right.
you don't have to go to that place. You can start small by just thinking about where you want to be a year from now and internally, because that's where it starts. We change from the inside out. We can't always change our external circumstances. Certainly not overnight. It's a long game. This is a long game if you want to eventually get out, but we have to start by changing what we believe inside about who we are.
And about who God is. Right.
And about who God is.
This conversation.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Because we tend to believe, as Christians, we tend to believe that God is kind of an abuser God. He's kind of like our pastor or our husband or our church family who says, if you do this, then I'm going to rain hellfire and brimstone on you, or we're going to kick you out, or we're not going to love you anymore. God is not people. I had to say that over and over again when I was getting out. God is not people. He's the opposite of people. He's way bigger than people.
Well, and interesting, I had to say, I am not God, which is, I cannot change all these people. I cannot be so good enough to make this all better. I cannot bend myself there's a great, they used to be called Dixie Chicks. I think they changed their name, but anyway, it's like, I'm going to let him fly. And it said, it would take an acrobat. And I already tried all that. I'm going to let him fly. And I could not be God. I could not be so infinite energy, infinite wisdom, infinite that I could just keep bending myself 1,000 different ways, hoping things would work out.
Right.
I already tried all that.
Well, and
I already tried all that. Yeah.
To keep in mind about that, as far as like trying to get your husband to change, and that is kind of a godlike thing that we want to do, but we tend to think, oh, well, God can do anything, so he can change our husband, and I just need to cooperate with God. We think that we're cooperating.
That's a good, yes, good. Yes, good point.
But
yes.
I want to make sure that people understand that God can make pink elephants fly across rainbows if he wants to. God can do anything. But God does not, he's not abusive. He doesn't control people. He doesn't control us. He lets us have free choice. And if our husband wants to be, you know what, he can be. He gets to make that choice. He's a big guy. He's an adult man. He can do that. And then we have to decide what we're going to do in that situation. Now that we're in this situation, what are we going to do? How are we going to show up? How do I want to live my life in this situation? And do I want to stay or do I want to leave?
And how do I want, in the Christian space, like when I stand before God, when I get to heaven at the end of my life, like, what do I want to answer for? Do I want to answer for, I stood for truth or stood for hiding?
Yeah.
Right. And hiding what was in the marriage, or hiding myself from what was actually happening in the marriage, right. And maybe that's later in the game, but just to kind of shift people's thinking on that, to say, it's not only the answer when you stand before God is, did you make your life work? Not, did you make your marriage work?
Right. Well, and to the woman who's listening and wondering, oh, then because I can hear women when they hear you say that, I know what I would have thought. I would have thought, oh, well, I was scared of the judgment of God. I mean, I didn't want to stand before God and have God say anything other than, well done, good and faithful servant.
Right.
If I would have thought that he would condemn me for hiding, then I would have been scared about that too. But
yeah, I don't want to make it worse.
But here's the possibility. I know what you're saying though. I know what you're getting at.
Yeah, I'm glad you're going back into it. Yes, yes.
So here's what I would say. Here's how you could think about it.
Okay.
You could think that you can come out of hiding for yourself. You can actually acknowledge the truth yourself. And even that is a huge, painful step. There's a Katy Perry song called Wide Awake. And she talks about, she's falling from cloud 9, which is, and she hits the concrete. She wants to believe that her relationship is amazing, but it really isn't. It pretty much sucks. So now she's hitting the concrete and she's wide awake now and realizing that's really painful. I mean, I was remembering when I was laying in bed reading a book and it hit me. This relationship is abusive. Like the word abuse came out of my mouth. And that was really, really painful. I did not want to go there, because then as soon as you admit that and you come out from hiding with yourself on that, then you kind of have to step back and go, okay, what am I going to do about this? I can't probably keep living my life the way I've been living it. But that doesn't mean if you're listening and you're going, oh my gosh, then I have to leave and I don't know how, and I can't. Some of you guys can't leave. And if you can't leave, that doesn't mean that you don't have any power at all. You know, that Solzhenitsyn, who was it? Alexander Solzhenitsyn was in a dark pit for I believe he was, I'm going to totally botch this. But from what I remember when I was a kid growing up hearing about him, he was in isolation, nobody around, in a pit, in a blackness for years, like years of his life. And one of the things I remember he said was something about how they could take everything away. They could take physical contact, they could take the light away, but they couldn't take his spirit. They couldn't take him away. He still had him in that dark pit. All right. And obviously you still have God, but I want women need to find themselves. They need to start connecting with themselves. You maybe have a crappy relationship with your husband. You can have an amazing relationship with yourself. The worst thing that abuse does to you is that it makes you have a crappy relationship with yourself, just like you have with your husband. Let's not do that. He can be an abuser. Let's not abuse ourselves. We don't want to do that.
Well, if he's against you and you're against you, it's 2 against 1.
Exactly.
I think that was Lundy Bancroft. I won't take credit for that.
I love that. I've never heard that, but I love that.
Oh, yeah. I do not take credit for that one, but I remember it.
Yeah.
Remember it. And the way I'll take credit for this, but the way I say it is, from birth to death, you are the only person you're stuck with for life. You are the only constant. Your husband, your children, your parents, everybody else comes in and out. You are forever stuck with you. So you better like her. Right? You better like her. Natalie Hoffman, Flying Free, flyingfree.com, her program for flying free. Anything else you want to tell them about?
Well, the URL, if they want to learn about the program, is just joinflyingfree.com. But my public website, which has free resources, is flyingfreenow.com. So
flyingfreenow.com. That's like when people say, I searched for Sarah Ramsey. I was like, Sarah Ramsey's like a horse farmer or something. I don't even know who she is. Sarah K Ramsey. It's like, it'll be a whole other Google, or just look up toxic person proof. That's easier. Yeah. But awesome, Natalie. Yes, check out Flying Free. I've followed Natalie for years now, and she's definitely the real deal. And thank you so much for coming on Toxic Person Proof to help us on our journey here.
Yeah, thank you. And fly free.
Fly free. That's right.